Coming up next, the story behind the music of one of the greatest 80s movies ever. This is one of those classic films that we quote every single day. And music was such an integral part of the movie. We have the story from the artist who contributed to the key moments in the film. Great interviews, including some happenings that I guarantee that you've never heard. Great stories. This is a rare one from a movie that we all wanted to live. It's coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. If you want the rarely told stories and the never-before details from the soundtracks of your life, you've come to the right channel. Just subscribe below. Make sure to click the bell so that you never miss out on our daily content. If you haven't already, check out our Patreon link. We give you more content. That really helps us to keep it a daily channel. Also, our merch does that as well. We appreciate it. Today, we're introducing a brand new show that we're going to be doing from time to time on Professor of Rock called Soundtrack. It's the story of the greatest movie songs and the movie soundtracks of all time. Music is such an integral part of any movie. You don't believe me? Just try pulling up some videos from YouTube where they've taken the soundtrack out, and the power of that film pretty much disappears. In 1986, a film was released by a true cinematic master. It resonated with the public at large, especially the under-20s. It was about faking sick and skipping school. It starred Matthew Broderick. It was written and directed by the great John Hughes. I'm talking about Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Bueller.
That time it became an instant classic, and it still is all these years later. So many great one-liners, so many great phrases that have become a part of our daily lives.
How could I possibly be expected to handle school on a day like this?
Probably the most underappreciated aspect of this legendary comedy is the soundtrack, when you think about it. Today we're going to go into details on many of those musical moments. And we all appreciate the moment where Ferris jumps on the float to convince Cameron that he's had a pretty good day.
And I'd like to dedicate it to a young man who doesn't think he's seen anything good today.
And the pick by John Hughes, Donkashane by Wayne Newton, that was genius. I mean, how many of us have crooned that song in the shower or in the car because of Matthew Broderick's classic lip sync? And then, of course, the show-stopping performance to the Beatles version of Twist and Shout. That single-handedly introduced the Fab Four to Generation X, really. I mean, many of my friends didn't even know who John, Paul, George, and Ringo were until that very scene. Who could forget this part?
I could be the walrus. I'd still have to bum rides off of people.
I also discovered songs by bands that I'd never even heard of, like Beat City by the Flower Pot Men. I mean, this song was so catchy, and yet in 1986, it was nearly impossible to find because the soundtrack wasn't ever released at that time. John Hughes apparently didn't think anyone would want it, is what he said. So the best that he did was he printed a few hundred 45s of Beat City to give away as a promotional item at screenings. I never got my hands on one because Blackfoot, Idaho was a long way from Chicago or Hollywood. Now, this is back in the olden days, well before you could pull it up and play it on Spotify. So I had to have my uncle record the audio part from the movie, from the VCR to a cassette tape. It's very frustrating because you only got a part of the song. The Flower Pot Men were a British electronic band that came of age in the 80s, of course. Not to be confused with the late 60s group of the same name who actually had a top 20 hit with Let's Go to San Francisco. The 80s group had an EP called Joe's So Mean. It was produced by Susie and the Banshees co-founder Steven Severin. One of the members of the Flower Pot Men, Adam Peters, actually played cello and piano parts on some of Echo and the Bunnymen's tracks, including The Killing Moon. The Killing Moon will come to... And then there was Sig Sig Sputnik that had the cool song playing as Ferris is breaking the fourth wall, which he does throughout the movie. Maybe the most iconic track to come from the film, Oh Yeah by Yello. It's actually released as a single in 1985. Of course, an eclectic mix of electronic music and manipulated vocals. It's just one of those amazingly addictive songs of the time, and from there on out, it became known as the Ferris Bueller song. And no doubt it was because, it was played the whole song at the end of the film when Ed Rooney has to ride the bus home.
I bet you've never smelled a real school bus before.
After that, it was used in quite a few other films, including in the Michael J. Fox coming-of-age movie, The Secret of My Success. That was just the next year. It's also part of the soundtrack for the movie She's Out of Control, old 80s movie. An Opportunity Knocks with Dana Carvey.
Saturday Night Live's Dana Carvey in Opportunity Knocks.
Remember, it was also used in a Twix commercial at the end of the 80s. I think went into the 90s. And then again for the Ferris Super Bowl ad spot.
Roderick.
You have excellent taste in automobiles.
This is a one-hit wonder that has never slowed down, although it really wasn't a chart hit. It only went to number 51 in the U.S., much bigger than its chart position, of course. It was re-released in 87 with extra lyrics, Such a Good Time, A Really Good Time. Coming up, we have interviews with two iconic artists who killed it in the 80s. Both were intimately involved in the soundtrack for Ferris Bueller's Day Off. They even worked alongside John Hughes to craft the music. Talking about Dave Wakeling of the English Beat, who had several 80s hits overall. And Nick Laird Clowes of the Dream Academy, whose hit Live in a Northern Town was a worldwide smash. Produced by Dave Gilmour, Pink Floyd. Both had some great songs in iconic moments in Ferris Bueller. Nick with the beautiful remake of the Smiths classic, Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want. From the scene in the art museum. That's one of my favorite scenes in the movie. It's actually one of the most moving parts in the movie. It's one of the serious parts. He also had the top 40 hit Edge of Forever, which for my money is one of the greatest hidden gems of the entire decade of the 80s. Also, Dave Wakeling tells us how they use his song for the climactic chase scene at the end of the movie. About his friendship with the late John Hughes, including a really cool story about hanging out at Wrigley Field with Matthew Broderick and John Hughes. You're going to love this. So as we go into these interviews for the rest of the soundtrack, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. Add some style to your look in the new year with the season's most fashionable eyewear in crisp, cool tones for the winter, customized to your liking. When you go to Zenni.com, you can create your look and you can add great features like blue blocks. Check it out today. Here's the rest of the story of the music from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. John Hughes, his movies, I would argue, are more popular today than they were even then, and they were huge then.
They are.
Because they're timeless. They speak to the youth. The youth of today, it doesn't matter. They love those movies. It really resonates with them. And you had a special friendship with John Hughes because he actually used your music in more of his movies than any other artist. But tell me a little bit about John Hughes. He's, of course, gone, and what an incredible filmmaker. He's left a legacy.
He was
to
a
live
lovely
forever.
person. And seemed quite surprised that he was making films. He said he wanted to be a musician, wanted to be in a band, and had an amazing collection of songs. Like, The whole wall of one big room in his house was just all albums, vinyl, you know? Even with one of those things, a librarian's thing for getting the ones on the top, you know, like wheel it around and get up the steps to get it. And he made me do a quiz with him because he didn't have it alphabetic, but he said he knew where every record was, that it was in his terms of where everything sat in the new wave. Wow. He's like, go on, try me. I'm like, boingo, easy. And he put it back in, and I go, Echo and the Bunnymen, piece of cake. There was a few thousand records, you'd have loved it. And he wanted to be in a group, and he wanted to be a musician, and so he made films instead, as if they were his songs. Which is perhaps how they connected, you know, with that feeling of youth and the save it for later feeling of, I'm not quite sure what I'm meant to be doing here, but... some of that same sort of thing.
We got to see the chase scene. We've talked about it. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, one of the most famous scenes from a movie ever. It's a mirror in the bathroom backwards, right? March of the Swivel.
March of the Swivel has his mirror in the bathroom backwards, yeah.
In the bathroom, please talk free. The door is locked, just you and me. Can I take it?
There was a DJ in Amsterdam whose gimmick was if you went in to do an interview, he gave you a cassette of your single recorded backwards for you to listen to in your van. Thank you. So he did. Don't stop the marimba, Marmaduke. I love you, baby. Baby, I love you. 2 songs. So yes, it was just mirror in the bathroom backwards.
Tell us the story about Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Foul territory. Boy, I'm really surprised.
Well, I was only about 3 feet away from him all afternoon as he was catching the ball, and he had to catch it loads and loads and loads of times, you know. And I was just off camera. He thought I was really famous at the time. So he was all chatty-catty to me, you know. He ended up being huge, didn't he? But he had loads of questions and stuff like that. And at the end, he gave me the ball. Took it back to England, and not much you could do with it, you know. Don't play baseball, it's not like a cricket ball, and kids ended up throwing it to the dog. And I could have just got it signed by him and Ferris and John, the 3 of them, put it in a case. Yeah, but I didn't. I let the dogs play with it, so it was a bloody shame.
Well, I'm really excited to speak with you about not only my favorite Dream Academy song, but one of my favorite songs, period, The Edge of Forever.
Okay, that was the first song Gilbert and I wrote together. He had that ding, 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 thing. And my band, the act, said, well, why are you writing with him? You write great songs. You don't need this. I said, I love this thing. And it was one of those ones, I didn't slave over the lyric. I went straight back. I was in the middle of a very painful relationship. You know, I was always feeling the girl. I was always on my own, and I was worrying about her, and you know, and the relationship, and it just flowed out. And you know, I was in my room with 1,000,000 hearts beating. When we kissed goodnight, there's 1,000,000 hearts beating in my room. I wish they would go away. So it was just a heartfelt cry. And when John Hughes picked it up, that was just fantastic.
You knew what you were doing when you woke up this morning, didn't you?
Me?
Well, you captured it so perfectly. I mean, the title alone just gives me the chills thinking about it. It makes you want to feel what the song is about. It's kind of one of those songs that you measure your relationship against. You're like, if I don't feel this about this person, I can't marry this person. Because I'll always wonder if there's that person out there that this song will make me feel.
Right. It's a Carl Sagan line. It was Carl Sagan, you know, the astrologer. He said, poised on the edge of forever. And Gilbert said, you know, he was always throwing me lyrics and saying, how about this? I tried it. Poised on the edge of forever. I said, nah. it doesn't work. But when I wrote the lyric, I was like, this is the edge of forever. This is it.
When you were young, did you ever love somebody like I love? I love that. And just pure poetry, and can't say enough about the song. It's really special. The lyrics, they have that just a fairy tale charm to them. When you're talking about a million hearts, I wish they'd go away. Very relatable to real life situations in relationships. Now that you're older, I see you don't mind letting go of my hand in the crowd. You don't want to hold tight. That line.
He's older than me, right? So it's like I'm suddenly became in this situation where I'm the yearning one, and she's like got her own life. It was, oh no, this is, well, anyway, it was, you've got it. I mean, but it brought that song to me. So, that's, and I love the way you mention it, because apart from, it's really only known for Ferris Bueller now, from the John Hughes movie. That's how it got its, he used it when they kissed goodnight. So come on.
He did. I love that moment in the movie. The bridge. It's one of the best bridges.
Oh, good. That's my George Harrison guitar. I'm playing my electric 12 on that. And I just, I love that. You mean when it goes...
The reasons that live feeling so afraid. I'm talking about two hearts beating as one, now forever. And that vocal, that emphasis right there. Oh. It's just a brilliant piece of pop right there.
Fantastic. I'm so pleased.
How did it come about with being in Ferris Bueller? Because, I mean, John Hughes had an ear for music. He was like, when I was growing up at least, cinematically, he was like our heroes of sound, of the music we were listening to. He understood the outcasts. I was one of the outcasts, the kid listening to new wave music in a country music town that I was growing up in, being taken away by this music and also being made fun of and bullied because I liked this different music. And John Hughes was just such a purveyor. He understood the outcasts. He understood what we were going through better than anybody, any filmmaker of that time for sure.
Like you say, I seen The Breakfast Club and I thought that's still my favorite of his, apart from maybe Trains, Automobiles, but that's a different genre. But Breakfast Club was brilliant.
The Breakfast Club.
Tarquin Gotch, that was the manager of the Dream Academy. He had been the road manager of Alfalfa, my first band. And then he'd worked his way through the business. He'd been a publisher. Then he'd gone to Warner Brothers as an A&R man. Then he'd gone to Arista. He'd signed to Stray Cats. He was now managing bands. And he heard Northern Town and he said, I'll make a demo of it. I'd like to manage you. When it was a hit, he started working with John Hughes, finding John music, because John was a huge music fan. And Tarquin was plugged into that whole London scene. And he played him our music. And John went, I love these. He threw out the score that he had, much to the poor composer's chagrin, because and put in our version of the Smiths' Please, 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 the instrumental version. And that transformed, at least he used that in the acid scene, as I like to call it, or the dope scene, with the pointillistic, where they go to the museum. It was like those 60s movies. There was always a moment where they'd go wild, and he was using our music in that. Wow. That happened. And then when we were making the next album, John Hughes, Tarquin was still working with him. And he said, can you get Nick to come in? And because I was in LA. And he said, finishing the album, and he said, could Nick come in and play the backing tracks to the new album? So I drove up to the 20th Century lot through those white gates with the guy, oh, good morning, and went to the back lot into a little room where John Hughes had a viewfinder. And now I actually met him, and he had one of those little things that you see people looking through and they're feeding the film through. And he asked me, play the tracks. Yeah, no, next. Then he suddenly said, play that again. And he said to the guy, give me the end of the film. Give me the middle, play it again. And he said, thank you. You saved my life again. So that was a very cool John Hughes thing to say. And he used that. And you know what? He used that song, Power to Believe, all the way through like score. That was a thrill, a real big moment. And funnily enough, it got the Dream Academy with its widescreen cinematic music, it got us into films. And Diane Keaton then asked us to make some music with Howard Shore. We went in with him and wrote something for her first directorial debut, Heaven. It was a very interesting way that happened.
Well, the fact that you got to meet John Hughes, because a lot of musicians who he used their music, they never got a chance to meet him. What was he like? Was there a moment that stood out?
That moment when he said, "Thank you, you've saved my life." When he was listening and when he was watching it, you could see how utterly focused he was. And I had no idea that it was going to be such a great film. I really think it's a really great film.
Please, please, please let me get what I want. One of the longest titles ever. And I mean, you're talking to the biggest Smiths fan out there. I love the Smiths. They're my favorite band of all time. Because it's a brilliant song. It wasn't released as a single, and it's such a short song, but it's so poignant. And you brought layers to that song that I didn't think were possible, because when you hear the Smiths version, you're like, that's the saddest song ever written.
So please, 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 let me.
And then, yet you bring this this orchestral, this almost like huge view, some layers to it that's very hard to do with a song that's so brilliant.
Please, 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 let me.
Jeff Travis from Rough Trade, who took our music to America and how we got signed to Warner Brothers, when we'd sit in his little office, he'd always play us the new thing that he'd signed, the Smiths, and we said, this is incredible. All three of us listened to these Smiths tracks, and we said, they're incredible. The Smiths started to have hits, and everywhere we went, the three of us would always say, we love the Smiths. People said, they're miserableists. There was this big thing, rather like people say about Leonard Cohen, and they were saying, this music's depressing. We said, no, you've never heard. We were always playing, please, please, please let me get what I want. As you say, it's like I don't know if it's barely even 2 minutes, the original. And after Life in a Northern Town, I said to David Gilmour, I want to do this version of this Smiths song because everybody says they're miserableists, but they're brilliant. They're brilliant musically. And he said, well, play it to me. And we played it. And the three of us just by then were just playing in a room. And he said, just come down on Saturday and we'll just do it. I'll do the drums on his Linn drum machine and the three of you play. And we just cut it over a weekend. It was just after all, the amount of time, Northern Town and the album and everything. And we all felt we'd got complete magic. I mean, and it had done what, and it was interesting. It wasn't our song. That wasn't the point. It had touched some kind of magic.
Well, and the way he used it too, like you said, in the psychedelic, I mean, when they're the art and in the museum, it was such a beautiful, that's one of my favorite scenes from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, because you have kind of this wacky comedy, so many great one-liners in that and everything, but then you get to that part and it's like John Hughes is kind of opening up his soul a little bit there with just that little moment where these teenagers are going in, they're experiencing something. Went on a vacation to Denver, Colorado with my kids, my wife. We go into this art museum and they have originals there, Monets and Rembrandts. And we're just blown away. We're just sitting there walking through and we're trying to get our kids to come in. My one son had his friend with him and they're 12, 13 years old and they're like, this is boring. It felt like that line from Ferris Bueller's, we haven't really done anything today. It's like, we've seen priceless works of art,
We went to a museum, we saw priceless works of art. We ate pancreas.
They should put the headphones on and play them some music, and then they see it.
John Hughes, he was the master of teenage angst.
Who do you love? Who do you love? You love a car.
He really knew my generation inside now, and our music.
Sincerely yours, The Breakfast Club.
There'll just never be another. Leave us a comment about John Hughes and this classic soundtrack and about his movies. What are your memories of his movies and these songs? What are your feelings about Dave from the English Beat and Nick Laird Clowes, these songs? If you like this video, make sure to subscribe below to be a permanent part of this channel. Make sure to check us out on Patreon. Also our new merch, including the Vintage Years collection. Help us keep the music alive. That's what we're trying to do here. Till next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.